Good morning, guys. So today is Wednesday, November 11th. Happy Veterans Day. Good morning. We are starting a new book today called The Plains Indians. Plains Indians. And this is a really big, full of information book. So we're going to take it in little short sections, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and flip the screen so we can start our video and make sure you can hear it. Now, part of this is Miss Sabella reading the book to you, but for some reason, she doesn't show you the book. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the book on the screen while you listen to her reading it when we get to that point, okay? All right, here we go.
Welcome back, curious observers. I'm Sue Sabella, your Great Minds teacher. Let's see what we need for today. Today we'll need Plains Indians, your journal, and a pencil. Please pause here to gather what you need. Both tribes.
Hold on.
Both tribes, your journal.
Sorry about that. My book touched the little mouse pad and it made it go fast forward. I'll start that again.
And a pencil. Please pause here to gather what you need and just hit play when you're ready to continue. What was life like in the West for early Americans? This question will guide our thinking as we explore a new text together. Since we're reading a book that's titled Plains Indians, we will narrow in our focus even more. What was life like for Plains Indians in the early American West? Let's find out. Please read this question to yourself, and then we'll read it together.
Okay, so it says, what do I notice and wonder about this text?
What do I notice and wonder about this text? And if the cover of your book looks a little different, like mine does, please don't worry about that. Let's get started with noticing and wondering. Most questions begin with one of the words in this chart. Deep thinkers wonder and ask questions as they read, and this chart will help you do that. I have a question for you that I'd like you to think about or chat about with a learning partner. When do readers and thinkers ask questions? Pause here to think about that or to chat about this question with a learning partner, and then just hit play when you're ready to continue.
So what do you guys think? When you're reading something, when are you asking questions? When are you thinking about questions? Is it just in the beginning? Is it just in the middle? Is it just at the end? Or are you asking questions and wondering all throughout the book? What do you think?
Readers and thinkers ask many questions while they're reading. We ask questions when we do not understand a word, when we need to know more about the text. Also, we ask questions when we want to think about what the author is telling us. Lastly, when we are confused about what's happening in a story, we ask many questions. When we're reading a text for the very first time, we'll have lots of questions. As we notice and wonder, many questions fill our head. Let's give it a try together. Let's practice using some of the question words on this chart. I'm going to read one sentence aloud, and I want you to think about the questions that are popping into your head. Here we go. It sounded like an earthquake. Wow. I already have a couple of questions popping into my head. One of my questions is, what sounded like an earthquake? Now it's your turn. Point to another question word that starts the question that is in your head about this sentence. I'll read it again. It sounded like an earthquake. What question do you have? Pause here to point to the screen or to tell your learning partner.
So my question would be, why did it sound like an earthquake? So I want you to look at the question words and think about what kind of question you could ask about that sentence and tell your learning partner. And when you're done, go ahead and push play.
When I use this chart and I'm thinking about this sentence, I can even generate or make more questions. Like, where did it sound like an earthquake? When did it sound like that? So many questions. I have to keep reading. We're going to do some noticing and some wondering together. You'll notice that the question words are here, and those can support you as you're making many questions in your mind as you're listening to the words in the text. Feel free to gently point to the screen when you're using one of the question words. Don't feel like you need to jot anything down now. When we're done noticing and wondering, we'll do a little bit of jotting then. You're in charge here. I'm going to continue to read, so you just pause when you have something that you'd like to think about or share with a learning partner. If there's something that you notice, pause and share with me or your learning partner. Or when you have a question, pause and point to that question word on the screen. Ready? Here we go.
Okay, so this is the part that I was talking about where Miss Sabella is going to continue reading the book to you, but she's not showing the book. And there are so many pictures and photographs in this book that I want you to see it. So I am going to attempt to do a split screen so that you guys can hear Miss Sabella and see the book at the same time. I was afraid that was going to happen. There we go. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. Okay, so here is the book. We're going to be able to look at the pictures while we are still listening to Miss Sabella read, okay? There, oh, no, it didn't work that time. Okay, hold on. I'm going to figure this out. Maybe it won't work on this one. Okay, so we'll just listen to her read while we look at the text. I'll even make it bigger so we can see it better. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is the pages that she started with, and here's the sentence. It sounded like an earthquake. So let's go ahead and listen.
The name of this section is titled American Indian or Native American. Sometimes the native peoples of North America are referred to as American.
Oh, it's right here. I'm sorry. I was like, where's she at? It's right here, down here on this part. Okay.
American Indians. Sometimes they are called Native Americans. So, which is correct? When Italian explorer Christopher Columbus came to the Americas in 1492, he used the name Indios or Indians to describe the native people. This was because he mistakenly believed he was in the Indies, an old term for Asia. Native American came into use in the 1960s as an alternative to Indian. Today, many of these descendants of the first people to live in North America would say that either term is acceptable. Better still,
Okay, I need to make sure that I'm sharing screen with you because I just have a really bad feeling that I'm not. Okay, looks good. All right, just wanted to make sure, guys.
most prefer to be identified by their unique group called a nation or tribe. For example, I'm a Cheyenne. Don't forget to pause to notice and to wonder. Be sure to share with your learning partner or share with me along the way. Just hit play when you're done sharing.
Okay, so if there's anything on that section that you would like to notice and wonder about, go ahead. I know Miss Sabella said not to write anything down, but I'd really rather you do it while it's fresh in your brain. So go ahead and hit pause, do your notice and your wonder, and then hit play when you're ready to move on.
Here we go. What are the Great Plains? The Great Plains area is an immense grassland in the middle of North America. It stretches from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains and from Canada's Saskatchewan River to Texas. It covers parts of 14 U.S. states and 3 Canadian provinces. The region's tall grasses bend in the strong winds that blow across the landscape. There are some wooded areas, especially along the rivers and creeks, where willow and cottonwood trees grow. But none of the large forests found in other parts of North America exist in the Great Plains. While much of the region is flat, there are a few hilly areas. These include the Ozark Mountains of Missouri and Arkansas, and the Black Hills of South Dakota. There are so many things to notice there, and so many questions. Be sure you're pausing along the way, and be sure to share with your learning partner or whisper it to me. Ready? Let's continue. The name of this section is, Who are the Indians of the Great Plains? On the dry western Great Plains, early Indians lived mainly by hunting bison. I have a question. Instead of living in permanent villages, they often moved from place to place, following bison herds and gathering wild plants. They became expert hunters and came to depend on the bison for most of their needs. Indian groups of the Great Plains. Some of the Plains Indian groups or tribes had once been farmers in the woodlands of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. These people include the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Sioux. Around 1400, they moved to the Great Plains and adopted a nomadic lifestyle. I have another question. Plains peoples roamed wildly, but most tribes could usually be found in particular areas. For example, the Arapaho hunted mainly in Colorado, and the Cheyenne hunted mainly in Wyoming. The Sioux were one of the largest Plains tribes and were made up of several different groups. The Teton Sioux or Dakota and the Yankton Sioux or Nakota occupied the Black Hills of South Dakota and lands to the west. The Blackfeet people and the Assiniboine people could be found in northern Montana along the present-day border between the U.S. and Canada. The Crow people lived to the south along the Yellowstone River. The area that is now Texas and Oklahoma was home to the Kiowa and Comanche. Both tribes were famous for their skilled horsemen. In fact, the Comanche were among the first Indians to acquire horses from the herds that the Spanish explorers brought to North America in the 1600s. Farmer hunters of the Great Plains. On the eastern...
Okay, we're going to stop right there. I just realized, guys, that I forgot to tell you to open up your journal. So open up your journal to page 57. Let's see if I can show you. Okay, we're on page 57, and you need to set up your notice in your Wonder chart. Today's date is 11/11. You need to put the title of the new text, Plains Indians. I apologize for not doing this before I told you to start. And get your notice in your Wonder chart. That way you have it to write on, okay? So go ahead and get that on there on page 57. All right, and then go ahead and do your notice and your wonder, if you have any notices and wonders on these 2 pages that we are just looking at. And then when you are ready, you can hit play again.
In Great Plains, more plentiful rainfall created conditions favorable to farming. Tribes in these areas raised crops such as corn, beans, and squash. Like tribes to the west, they also hunted buffalo, but they did not share the nomadic lifestyle of the Western Plains Indians. Because their farms provided much of what they needed to survive, they were able to live in villages for most of the year. The Wichita people lived along the Arkansas River. In the 1500s, they were among the first Plain Indians to meet Europeans. Further north were the Kansa people, who migrated to present-day Kansas from their original home east of the Mississippi River. What animals did early Plains Indians need? Plains Indians depended on several different kinds of animals to provide many of their daily needs. The bison was at the center of life for early Plains Indians. The bison is the largest land animal to roam North America in modern times. Even though an adult weighs as much as 1 ton or over 2,000 pounds, bison can still run at speeds of around 30 miles an hour. For thousands of years, bison roamed the Great Plains in huge herds. These enormous animals provided most of what Plains peoples needed to live. Plains Indians were experts at hunting bison and at making use of every part of the animal. The clothes they wore and the cone-shaped tents they lived in, called teepees, were made from bison hides. They sharpened the bones of bison and carved them into tools. They used the horns of bison to make spoons, cups, rattles, and toys. They braided shaggy bison hair into rope. Of course, bison were an important source of food, too. After men hunted the animals, women cut up the bison meat. They preserved some of it for later by cutting it into long strips and hanging it to dry on racks in the hot sun. Once meat was dried this way, it could be stored for long periods of time without spoiling. The bison was like a walking store, providing food, clothing, tools, and more. Even bison waste was put to use. Plains Indians used it as fuel for their campfires. Transportation. Before they acquired horses, early Plains Indians traveled on foot. They relied on dogs to carry heavy loads as they followed bison herds across the plains. They loaded their supplies and belongings onto a kind of sled called a travois. A travois was made of 2 poles tied together in a V shape, with strips of rawhide stretched across the V. The travois was attached to the shoulders of a dog, which dragged the load behind itself. Horses. The first modern horses were brought to North America by Spanish explorers in the 1600s. Small early horses had once lived in North America millions of years ago, but they had died about 9000 BC. Plains Indians began to acquire horses through trading with other tribes or by raiding other tribes. By the late 1700s, horses were common among the Plains Indians. Horses changed the way Plains Indians lived. With horses, Plains Indians could travel farther and faster than ever before. It made their nomadic lifestyle easier, allowing them to move their camps from place to place as they followed the bison. Plains Indians also found that they could track and hunt bison more effectively on horseback. Tribes such as the Crow gave up their farming lifestyle to become nomadic hunters. Horses also made them more effective warriors, able to attack their enemies quickly and suddenly.
Okay, I'm gonna actually leave it here for just a minute because I didn't realize that she was on the next page. So I'm gonna let you look at the photographs here and see if you have any notices and wonders from this page and this page. Okay, so if you need to pause for this page, go ahead. And you can pause for, oops, sorry, this page and this page. So if you need to do any notices and wonders for these two pages, go ahead and do that. Okay.
Hunting. Hunting was one of the most important parts of the Plains Indian culture. Plains Indians hunted many animals, but none was more important to them than the bison. The nomadic tribes moved from place to place to stay close to the wandering bison. Farming tribes of the prairies left their villages each summer to take part in animal hunts. Hunting was a community activity for the peoples of the Great Plains. Men, women, and children worked together to make a successful hunt. The bravest and most skillful hunters and warriors sometimes acted as the hunt police. Their job was to organize the other hunters so they worked as a team. Plains Indians developed clever techniques for hunting bison. Hunters on foot might sneak up on a herd by covering themselves in wolf skins. This way, they could get close to the animals without alarming them. Another strategy was to start grass fires that would frighten the bison into stampeding to their deaths off of tall cliffs. After Plains Indians acquired horses, they became skillful riders who could hunt while moving at high speeds. When the hunt was over and the bison were killed, there was still much work to do. Women worked to preserve the meat for future use. They also worked at tanning the bison hide, turning it into leather that could be used for robes and bedding. This is the last section that we'll notice and wonder about during this lesson. I'm sure you've noticed a lot and that you have many questions. Keep going, and then we'll do some jotting when we're done. Here we go. What did early Plains Indians farm? Farming was the main source of food and wealth for the early Plains Indians that lived in villages. Farming tribes lived on very fertile land along the major rivers of the Great Plains. With plentiful rain and good growing condition, they could grow more corn and other crops than they needed. Extra crops could be traded with other tribes for metal tools, cloth, bison hides, and other valuable goods. Farming was mainly the work of women. They planted the fields, tended them, and harvested the crops. Their tools were made from things found in the natural world around them. They used animal bones, horns, and antlers to make hoes and rakes. Women also made clay pots for storing food. The title of this section is called The Three Sisters. Corn, or maize, as American Indians called it, was the most important crop for most tribes. It grew well in many areas, was easily stored, and could be prepared in a variety of ways. It could be used in soups and stews, or it could be dried and pounded into cornmeal. Women used wooden tools called pestles to grind dried corn into meal. Farming tribes almost always planted corn alongside squash and beans. Corn stalks provided a pole for bean vines to climb. The leaves of the squash plants helped keep the soil moist. Because the three crops worked so well together, they were often called the Three Sisters. Farming tribes also grew pumpkins, sunflowers, and tobacco. As we read Plains Indians, there were many things to notice, and I'm sure that you generated many questions. Some of the questions you just can't wait to discover the answer. Those are called pressing questions or burning questions. I'd like you to pause here to grab your journal so you can jot down 2 pressing questions. What do you really need to know the answer to? What are you curious about? Once you've jotted down those 2 questions, just hit play so we can wrap up today's lesson.
Okay, so you were making notes the whole way through that about things that you noticed and wondered. But what I want you to do is think about which 2 of your questions are the most important to you, okay? So on page 57, if you have not done any notices and wonders yet, I want you to rewind the video and listen to it again and come up with at least 2 questions that you are wondering. If you did do this while Miss Sabella was reading, I would like for you to figure out which 2 are the most important questions to you, okay? So I have 2 important questions. I want to know, what does nomadic mean? And I also want to know, what does bison waste mean? I heard her talking about that, but I don't know what she meant by it. So I circled my 2 most pressing questions. So after you do your notices and your wonders, figure out which 2 are the most important question to you and then circle it. Okay.
Point to the question words that you used in your pressing questions. Also, circle them in your journal. Pause here for a minute to do that work, and then just hit play when you're ready to continue. Today, there was so much to notice and so much to wonder about, and you did some very powerful thinking. I will see you again soon, my friends.
Okay, so today's lesson is that we just listened to Miss Sabella read the text, and I showed you the text, which I'm also going to upload for you today. So you will have a copy for yourself. On page 57, you did your notice and wonder chart, And you circled your two most pressing questions, the two questions that you thought are the most important. And what Miss Bella said at the very end to circle the question words could have been a little confusing. So I want to show you what she means. I'm using blue. It doesn't matter. You don't have to use blue. If I'm looking at my wonder column, my first one says, what sounded like an earthquake? What's the question word there? It's what? So I'm going to circle the word what. My next one says, why did it sound like an earthquake? What's the question word there? It's why. My third one says, what does nomadic mean? What's the question word? It is what. So I'm going to circle the word what. My next one says, how did they learn to make toys out of buffalo bones? What's the question word there? How. And my last one, what does bison waste mean? What's the question word? It's what. So in your wonders, you need to go through and circle the question word. So you're going to circle the two questions that are most important to you, and then you're going to circle the question words in all of your wonders. Okay, and then you are going to upload this into a Google slide that I will provide for you. And that's all that you're required to do for me today. Okay, so short class. I will see you guys tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed our new book. It's very interesting. We're going to learn lots of information with this one. And let's see, today's secret word is going to be, let's see, what could it be? Flag. It's going to be flag. Today's secret word is flag. All right. So I will see you guys later. Have a great afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow.